The absurd is born of the confrontation between the human call and the unreasonable silence of the world. We like to think that we fear monsters, but what if what we really fear is not knowing? Why do we hate uncertainty? Why is a picture of a hallway more unsettling than a monster? I think that one of the most interesting demonstrations of Albert Camus' philosophy isn't a philosophical text. It's a horror movie called The Backrooms.
When I first watched the Backrooms movie, I genuinely thought people would love it, or at the very least, understand what it was trying to do. Instead, when the movie finished up, the reaction was almost immediate. People asked what the point of the movie was. People said they didn't get it. They said that the ending was so random and really confusing, or that it was just boring. In the beginning, these criticisms seemed completely unrelated. Some people thought the story was unclear, others thought it was just slow. But the more I talked to people who didn't enjoy the movie, the more it felt like everyone was just complaining about the same thing. The film didn't spoon-feed the audience all of the answers, as most movies normally do. On social media, people's responses looked really similar. On TikTok, Reddit, Letterboxd, and YouTube, the same complaints kept appearing again and again. People called the movie random, pointless, pretentious, and too confusing. And to be fair, they're not entirely wrong. It doesn't clearly explain what the entity is. It doesn't tie together every mystery. It doesn't hand the audience a final explanation and tell them exactly what happened. In fact, the further the film progresses, the more confusing things become. And that's exactly where the criticism starts to get interesting. If thousands of people are frustrated by the same thing, maybe the real question isn't whether the movie was confusing. Maybe it's, why does confusion bother us so much in the first place? Why does uncertainty feel so uncomfortable? Why do we become frustrated when a story doesn't give us all the answers? You know, what if the frustration isn't evidence that the film failed, but proof that it succeeded? And uncertainty is exactly where an Algerian philosopher, Albert Camus, comes in. Before we go any further, it's probably worth explaining what The Backrooms actually is. The film was directed by Kane Parsons when he was just 19. He first gained attention as a teenager through a series of short films based on the internet horror phenomenon of the same name. If you've somehow avoided The Backrooms for the last few years, the basic idea is deceptively simple. Imagine accidentally slipping out of reality and finding yourself trapped in an endless maze of empty rooms. There's yellow walls, buzzing fluorescent lights, identical hallways that stretch out in every direction, no obvious way in and no obvious way out. No explanation of how you got there and no complete certainty that you're alone. What's interesting is that The Backrooms isn't really interested in traditional horror. There are monsters and there are moments of danger, yes, but the film isn't built around jump scares in the same way that most horror movies are. Instead, it focuses on something much stranger, the atmosphere, isolation, and memory. The feeling that something is deeply wrong, even if you can't really put your finger on it. A lot of this comes from the usage of liminal spaces. It's a place that feels familiar and unfamiliar at the same time. Places that seem as though they should be full of people, but aren't. The result is a film that leaves both the characters and the audience in a state of confusion and uncertainty. You rarely know exactly where you are, you don't really know what's happening, and you almost never know what comes next. Which might sound frustrating, but that uncertainty is also the key to why the film works. And that's where Albert Camus comes in. The Backrooms creates this exact tension for the audience. In 1942, Albert Camus published a philosophical essay called The Myth of Sisyphus. At its core, the book is concerned with a surprisingly simple problem. Humans desperately want answers. We want the world to make sense. We want clear patterns and explanations and meanings and reasons. When something happens, our instinct is to ask why. Why did that happen? Why does it matter? What's the correct answer? According to Camus, the problem is that reality doesn't always cooperate, and the universe rarely provides the certainty that we're looking for. Sometimes there's no explanation. Sometimes there's no clear meaning. Sometimes all we get is confusion. And it's from this clash that Camus develops one of his most famous ideas, the absurd. Not absurd in the sense of something ridiculous, Absurd in the sense that humans are constantly searching for meaning in a world that doesn't reply to them. As Camus put it, the absurd is born from the confrontation between the human need for answers and the world's refusal to provide them. Most people, he argued, struggle to live with the uncertainty, so they look for ways to escape it. Camus called one of these escapes philosophical suicide. It's a decision to abandon uncertainty in favor of comforting certainty. Not to force an answer onto a question simply because not knowing feels unbearable. But Camus believed that there was another option. Instead of running from uncertainty, we can confront it. Instead of demanding answers, we can learn to live without them. That is what Camus called the absurd man. It's someone who accepts that not every question has an answer. Someone who continues searching and questioning and exploring anyway. And once you understand this idea, something interesting starts to happen. The Backrooms stops looking like a confusing horror movie and instead starts looking like a machine designed to create this exact tension that Camus was describing. Because throughout the entire film, the audience wants answers and the movie refuses to give them. Think about the questions people ask after watching The Backrooms. What exactly is the entity? The film never gives a definitive answer. What happened to Bobby? No answer. Why can Kat see Clark through the wall? Again, no answer. What is the Backrooms itself? A place, a dimension, a manifestation of trauma? The film never commits to a single explanation. And then there's perhaps the strangest question of all. Why does the entity resemble Clark? The movie hints at an answer, but never fully explains it. And at first, this feels frustrating. You keep waiting for the moment where everything clicks into place, the moment the film finally pulls back and serves you all the answers on a silver platter. But that moment never comes. Instead, the questions start multiplying. Every answer seems to create two new mysteries. Every clue opens another possibility, and before long, you begin to realize that the uncertainty isn't a mistake. Because if all of these unanswered questions were simply mistakes, we'd expect them to feel random and careless, but they don't. The pattern appears over and over again throughout the entire film. The audience asks, "What does this mean?" The film responds, "Figure it out." The audience asks, "What's the right interpretation?" The film responds, "Maybe there isn't one." The audience asks, "What really happened?" The film responds, "What do you think happened?" Most movies treat interpretation as optional, critical thinking as something you can do if you want to. The Backrooms makes it mandatory. You can't just sit back and receive all the answers. You have to participate, theorize, and connect ideas. You have to decide which interpretation makes the most sense. In other words, the film forces the audience into the exact situation that Camus describes, where being completely sure of the right answer is unavailable, where the questions exist without clear answers. And for some viewers, that's fascinating, and for others, it's infuriating. But either way, it's impossible to ignore. At this point, there's an assumption hiding underneath a lot of the criticisms. Something so common, most people never even stop and think about it. If something is confusing, it must be bad. If a story leaves questions unanswered, it must be flawed. If the audience doesn't immediately understand something, then the creator must have failed. But why? Why do we assume that confusion and failure are the same thing? Because when you think about it, some of the most rewarding experiences in life begin with confusion. A difficult book you want to read, a piece of music that you want to learn, something that doesn't make sense immediately. It demands your attention, and it asks you to sit with uncertainty for a while. We don't call those experiences failures. We call them engaging. Yet, when a film does exactly the same thing, many people react very differently. They want answers, explanations, closure. The movie must tell them exactly what happened, what everything means, exactly what they're supposed to feel by the end of the film. And when it doesn't, they often leave frustrated. But maybe that's because we've become used to stories that explain everything for us. Books that neatly connect every dot, movies that answer every question before we've even had time to ask it. Media that guides us from beginning to end without ever allowing us to get lost. There's nothing inherently wrong with that, but it creates an expectation that every mystery should be solved, that every symbol should have at least one correct meaning. Every story should arrive with a big instruction manual. The Backrooms refuses to do that. And that's exactly why I couldn't stop thinking about it. Hours after the movie ended, I was still turning it over in my head, still questioning things, still looking for connections, still debating possible interpretations. Not because the film had failed to communicate anything, but because it had given me something to engage with. And maybe it's ironic that the people who dismissed the film because it left them uncertain are actually proving its point. Confusion forces participation, and interpretation creates meaning. Sometimes the stories that stay with us the longest are the ones that refuse to give us all the answers. For Camus, the absurd man isn't someone who solves every mystery. It's a person who learns to live without solving them. They resist the temptation of easy answers, and they accept uncertainty and continue searching for meaning anyway. Once you look at the Backrooms through that lens, the audience's reaction becomes surprisingly revealing. Some viewers encounter something unclear and immediately reject it. They decide the film is confusing and pointless. End of discussion. But other viewers respond very differently. They start theorizing and searching for patterns, rewatching scenes and comparing interpretations. In doing so, they begin engaging with the film in exactly the way that Camus might have hoped. Not by eliminating uncertainty completely, but by exploring it. For example, some viewers have compared the Backrooms to a labyrinth. It's an endless maze that traps those who enter it. And if the Backrooms is a labyrinth, what does that make the entity? A minotaur? A monster lurking at the center? Some viewers also connected the entity to the myth of Saturn devouring its children, a story about consumption and the destruction of one's own creation. The film never confirms any of these interpretations, but that's precisely what makes them interesting. The audience is invited to participate in creating their own meaning. Why does the entity resemble Clark? Is it a manifestation of guilt? Is it a reflection of his own psyche? A representation of memory? Is it a literal monster? The film never settles the debate, and yet people continue discussing it. Theories continue emerging, even years after the original Backrooms videos were released. Again, the film never confirms this interpretation, but it doesn't need to. The value of the film isn't found in arriving at the correct answer, but in looking for any answer. That's why I think so many criticisms of the film miss what makes it so special. The Backrooms is rewarding because it gives room for interpretation. Every single unanswered question becomes an invitation. The viewers willing to embrace that uncertainty often walk away with a far richer experience than those who reject it outright. Not because they've discovered all the answers, but because they've learned how to live with the questions. The movie becomes a case study for wider human tendencies. Maybe that's why the Backrooms fascinates me so much. Because I don't think that the people's reaction to the film is really about the film. I think it's about us. It's about how confusion makes us uncomfortable, not just in movies, but in life in general. When someone takes too long to reply to a message, we start inventing our own explanations. When a relationship ends, we obsess over what really happened. When we're forced to make a major decision, we desperately search for any signs that we're making the right choice. We want certainty, and we want to know that everything is going to be a-okay even before we've taken the risk. But life doesn't really work that way. Most of the important questions we face don't arrive with clear answers. We don't know exactly where our careers will lead, or how relationships will end, or if we're making the right choice about anything really. And yet we make those decisions anyway. Camus understood this better than most. He believed that the uncertainty was a fundamental part of the human experience, the challenge with learning how to live without all of the answers. And that's why I think the Backrooms resonates with some people so deeply. Underneath the monsters and the corridors and the mystery, the film is confronting the audience with something familiar. The feeling of searching for answers that may never come. Some viewers experience that feeling and walk away frustrated. Others experience it and become curious. But either way, the film exposes something that most of us would rather avoid: our discomfort with confusion and our innate human desire for certainty. In that sense, The Backrooms becomes more than a horror movie. It becomes a case study. It's a demonstration of what happens when people are denied answers they think they're entitled to. And the reactions from the movie reveal a lot more about human nature than one might think. So, why did so many people hate the Backrooms? At the beginning of the video, I suggested that the answer might have a lot less to do with the movie itself and more to do with Albert Camus. I think that's still true, because when you strip away the monsters, the theories, and the endless yellow hallways, what's left is a film that refuses to provide certainty. It's a little confusing and doesn't explain itself completely. It doesn't answer every question, and for some viewers, it's frustrating, and for others, it's fascinating. But either way, the reaction tells us something interesting. Maybe the real question isn't whether the Backrooms is confusing. It's why does confusion make us so uncomfortable in the first place? Camus believed that the human search for meaning collides with a universe that rarely provides clear answers. The absurd is born from that collision. And in a strange way, the Backrooms recreates that experience for its audience. It confronts us with unanswered questions, with unclearness and uncertainty. Then it waits to see how we'll respond. And maybe that's why so many people hated it, or maybe that's exactly why it's worth talking about. Because the thing that people hated the most about the Backrooms is the same thing that makes it interesting. Not the monster, not the endless hallways or the yellow walls, the uncertainty. And perhaps what matters most isn't whether we find the answers, but what our search for them reveals about us.